I used to tell people, in my opinion, back in the day, that I thought Meta was the top people analytics team
Thank you.
in the world when they would ask me that question. I would never say it publicly because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But who do you think is the top people analytics team now? And who do you think were some of the best people analytics teams in the past? And maybe where did those top teams come from?
So if you want to get spicy, I'll give you some hot takes and some curious takes.
In quasi-retirement, you're not doing any relaxation and you're only doing stuff all the time, including with me. So what are you up to now?
So I am kind of flunking retirement, but I never framed it as retirement. I keep calling it my post-corporate season.
SIAB Leading Edge Consortium. Give more of the backstory there. And why should people attend this year? We covered it on an episode with Stephanie Murphy a while back, but I'm really thrilled to be a part of that. That's your doing. So well done. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Leading Edge Consortium.
Yeah. So
welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with Colin Scott and today's guest, Alexis Fink, principal at Propeller Insight and longtime people analytics and workforce strategy leader at Meta, Microsoft, and Intel. Hey, Directionally Correct fans. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, watch our videos on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization. So, Alexis, you've been living in a log cabin now?
In the summers, yeah. We have it was built originally in 1925. And when we bought it, you could see out every corner because the chinking had degraded so badly. And God bless my mother, who has an amazing attitude of it. If it can be done, I can do it. Set about re-chinking the entire place. And yeah, it was amazing.
So you did it all yourself?
Well, I didn't. My mother did it. I mean,
okay.
I'm allowed to do, we painted part of the cottage this year, right? I'm not allowed to do things like she re-chinked the whole cabin, which she did with an artist's brush, by the way. It looks like art. And then she put 50 pounds of mortar in when she re-tuck pointed the stone chimney, because the chimney is made of stones, not stone veneer like a modern house. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I decided that I was just going to start this podcast off in the weirdest way possible. And I just wanted to say how much I admire you, Alexis.
Oh, you're very kind.
I've told you this stuff privately, but there's a lot of people that I admire, and a lot of I'm really blessed to have had them on as guests on the podcast. But of all of them, I think I admire you the most, and I think it's just because you're so stinking brilliant, first of all, but also you just have this, unimpeachable work ethic, and it's almost I know I've explained kind of my theories on these to you privately, but I feel like you have this underdog mentality, but you always keep winning too. So it's almost like you're the favorite. Aww. And so I love that about you, Alexis, and I wanted to say it publicly. So thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. And as you know, you experienced my favorite moment on the podcast that we've ever had when we recorded our first time at SIAB. So I appreciate you doing that too. So thank you for joining today.
Well, now I'm all, feeling verklempt. I'm delighted. Thank you so much. And I am honored. And, being a Midwesterner, I think kind of imbues you with a really solid work ethic. Plus I get a lot of meaning out of most of the stuff that I do. And you're a psychologist, a scientist, that there's a difference between pleasure and happiness, right? I don't want to do things. I'm not really into the, let's see, pedicure theory of how to have a good time. I would rather, yesterday afternoon I had a break and I went and I weeded my flower bed that had been taken over. And that was really gratifying to me. So I think it's just maybe a little bit of a different psychological makeup.
I think when I shared with you one time, my Hogan hedonism score is a 2.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, it's like there's like nothing there to
Maybe
work
that's
with.
why we get
So,
along.
well, since you've last been on the podcast, you have made some big life changes in terms of your work
Yeah.
and everything that you've been doing. So, I guess what are you up to nowadays? 'Cause I feel like in quasi retirement, you're not doing any relaxation and you're only doing stuff all the time, including with me. So, what are you up to now?
So I am kind of flunking retirement, but I never framed it as retirement. I keep calling it my post corporate season.
There you go.
And in all honesty, I have a dear friend who had a CHRO role and had a stroke during it, which was kind
Oh
of
no.
scary for the kind of hours I was running. And I've got my dad's brother was a surgeon, and he had a stroke 2 years before he'd planned to retire and had to spend 2 years learning how to walk again. Right. And I just didn't want that to be my life, but I wasn't willing to, just play pickleball all the time as well. So I am calling this my post corporate season. I'm talking about having not retired, graduated from corporate life, and conveniently, I chose a moment to graduate, which was the same as my youngest child graduating from college. So we had a lot of graduations happening this spring. What I'm doing with myself, I have a couple of sort of steady gigs, I suppose. I get to run the People Analytics Board for I4CP, which I started back in, I think we figured out it was 2017, stepped away while I was at Meta, stepped back into it. That's been a lot of fun. In this season, I was anxious about how was I going to have time with people I really respect and learn from what's happening on the ground. So that scratches that itch for me. I've had a relationship with the Center for Effective Organizations at USC since about 2007, so going on 20 years now. Do some teaching, and we're building some fun stuff over there coming out in the next couple of months. I'll be able to talk about that, but continuing to do some projects and some writing and whatnot. I have been doing other kinds of writing. Had a Fast Company piece not that long ago with Tomas Chamorro for Music, who I just adore. We're working on another one right now, so stay tuned for that. As you know, I'm playing with the PsyOp Leading Edge Consortium. I just am over the moon about that coming together. I've been working on getting that thing to happen since about 2018. We were close. The pandemic shut it down, and now we're finally bringing it to life. So that is just going to be a rager. It's going to be super, super great. I'm excited about the opportunities to play there. Get to go to HR Tech next week. By the time this airs, I will have been at HR Tech the prior week, I think is how that time is going to work. And then I'm excited to do a keynote at Seattle AI Week at the end of October. So I'm getting to do all the things that I kind of couldn't when I was doing 80 to 100 hours a week as a VP at a big company that had a lot going on. Scratching all of my intellectual itches, kind of being a fake professor, and starting to line up some client work to help organizations, do smart stuff around AI in the future of work.
Absolutely. Well, I want to dig into one of those just because this will come out before it happens. But the PsyOp Leading Edge Consortium, give more of the backstory there, and why should people attend this year? We covered it on an episode with Stephanie Murphy a while back, but I'm really thrilled to be a part of that. That's you're doing so well done. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Leading Edge Consortium.
Yeah, so PsyOp hosted a leading edge consortium on people analytics back in 2016, and it was a screaming success, sold out, was fantastic. And I think one of the things that really differentiated the way PsyOp approached this, and in full transparency, I ran it. So of course I like the way we approached it, right? But we are in part professional instructional designers when you're an IO psychologist, right? So we approached it in a really structured and effective way. And we have access to a network of really spectacular talent. The fact that PsyOp is a nonprofit also makes some people who would feel a little squidgy about going to a for-profit event and presenting at a for-profit event feel a little bit more comfortable, given that this is really in service of the community. Because it's a nonprofit, registration is lower, so it's more accessible. And I think we've done, once again, you and Stephanie have done a brilliant job of saying, here is what an effective event would look like. And now let me go fill slots with the very best people in the world to talk about those things, instead of saying, who are some smart people and what do they want to talk about, which is how a lot of conferences are built. Let me find some name brand folks and let them talk about whatever their, sort of shtick that year might be. So I think that curated aspect, I think the quality of the folks we're able to bring, and I think, frankly, the fact that it really is a community service and not a for-profit enterprise kind of come together to make it pretty special in a lot of ways. We have been careful not to make it the all IO show. And the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of the Leading Edge Consortium is actually one of outreach. For those who are familiar with SIOP, the big annual conference, typically in April, occasionally in May, is sort of by PsyOp and mostly for PsyOp. It's pretty IO centric, just 20 concurrent sessions, so there's a lot there, but it has been pretty IO focused. The Leading Edge Consortium is about the content and the community, and by design, we want folks who are practitioners in this space to come together and learn instead of just a bunch of IOs talking to each other. So I'm really excited about it. I am doing a pre-conference workshop on ROI. Metrics and value are big themes for me for decades. I get to do that with my friend Madhura Chakrabarty. Was just looking at the slides before I turned my camera on. It's going to be great. That one is almost sold out, which I'm excited about. And then I get to do the opening keynote, which I just realized this morning is only 30 minutes and not 45. So I'm going to have to figure out what I can slice out of my plan to make it fit in the allowable slot so we don't start the event out behind schedule. And then I also get to sit on a panel, a cross-functional panel with folks like an economist. I won't drop the names. It was an economist, a mathematician. Actually, I will. Amit Mahendra and my very dear friend Keith McNulty, and we're going to pull things together and kind of talk about how this work draws on so many different disciplines, kind of like your tree of value puts forward. So I'm excited about all those things.
Thank you for the shout out there. I don't think I've ever actually talked about it on the podcast, so that's good.
Oh, take a second. Do the commercial for the tree of value.
No. Maybe some other time, some other guest. How about that?
Okay.
But one of the things that I'm really glad you touched on is that the Leading Edge Consortium is for everybody. It's not just for IO psychologists.
Yeah.
One very interesting needle I've had to thread with this conference is to make sure, and I have this all the time too, it's like there's a community of people who are IO psychologists and involved in people analytics. There's a community of people who are not IO psychologists who also love working with IO psychologists in people analytics.
Yep.
And then there are people who abhor and dislike the IO psychologists because they think they're know-it-alls and they are hard to work with, and they're whatever reason they dislike it. And I really I feel like I'm right at that juncture between that community and the rest of the community, because a lot of people secretly lean in and tell me how much they hate IO psychologists. I'm like, you realize I am one, right? And so I wanted you to explain why is IO psychology important to people analytics, but also why are we trying to bring people into the fold, and why is this for everybody?
Oh, you ask the best questions, my friend. So people analytics, really, in my mind, and I've been doing it since before Tom Davenport named it people analytics, so I think I have a little bit of a leg to stand on here. People analytics, in my mind, is really the outgrowth of IO psychology in practice. So it is applying data and rigor to problems of people at work, driving value and supporting its sort of individual effectiveness and well-being and all those other kinds of things. To really do that brilliantly, particularly in a modern workplace, requires skills that you don't typically get taught in an IO psychology graduate program. It requires all kinds of data science. And let me tell you, I didn't learn how to manage, tables, and I didn't learn any kind of product design, although I did learn some human factors. I didn't learn much in the way of product design, or certainly back when I was in school, we weren't playing with some of the more advanced techniques. Nobody was doing ONA or playing with support vector machines or gradient descents or any other cool things we get to play with these days. And really, we weren't talking very much about influencing executives. We were mostly talking about finding out the real answer to an important problem. So I think that the core of people analytics is still very much rooted in the science and the substance that comes forward, but bringing it to life and making it accessible and valuable and making it take advantage of everything that's possible in a modern organization kind of requires some of these other skills and capabilities, some of these other disciplines that are frankly better at those things than IOs. I used to say that it took me about a year to deprogram a freshly minted IO PhD to make them useful in a PA team. And even so, I had one small PA team that was actually, even that one wasn't all people analytics. It was like a marketing person at one point. But every ever the big PA teams I've run have been maybe 50 to 30% people, IO psychologists, and the balance of the team have come from different places. So I think it's really core. I get nervous about PA teams that don't have any IO psychology. There are things about ethics. There are things about how a team runs. There are things that IO psychologists are expert in that you don't typically get in other disciplines that I think are really essential to have a healthy function. But I also get nervous when I see some that are nothing but IOs, that don't have the technical rigor, that don't have some of the influence and business acumen pieces, that maybe are uh, frustrated because they're not getting as much traction, or they're just being asked to build dashboards, which frankly aren't the kind of thing that is a great use of an IO PhD.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate you sharing that, Alexis. I think I don't know, just people. I don't know why it's so difficult to just say like, "Hey, we need balance,"
Right.
right? And everybody brings something to the table, and we're also fun to hang out with too, guys. So come join us. We're a lot of fun. It's going to be great. Come to Atlanta. Um, I do want to kind of build on something you were saying earlier, though, and we were talking about this before the podcast, that we both feel like people analytics is set to change over the next few
Oh,
years,
yeah.
and we're hoping at least to get away from the tyranny of dashboards. So, can you talk to me at all about what is the tyranny of dashboards and how is people analytics set to change over the next few years?
I have like a half written article about the tyranny of dashboards. And I want to be clear, I believe very strongly in access to data. I believe very strongly in healthy curation of metrics so that when I pull, the obvious common example is attrition, I'm looking at attrition the same way you are, right? We're both looking at trailing 12 months instead of annualized. We're both not including interns. We're both defining this in the same way so you and I can have a conversation that makes sense instead of talking past each other. I am super on board with all of that. To me, the tyranny of dashboards is when a people analytics team gets constantly derailed by building a new dashboard for every bespoke request that an executive wants. At one point, I remember in one of my jobs, which I won't rat out, we audited, and something like 75% of our dashboards had fewer than 5 lifetime visits, right? We spent a bunch of time building it. We put it out there. The person who wanted it looked at it a couple of times, realized it wasn't quite backing up that person's story in the way that they wanted, and then it died. And so we'd invested, I don't know, 30, 70, depends on how complicated it was, hours in building this thing that got almost no traction. And it's a terrible use of time, and tools now are sophisticated enough that for the most part, as long as the data governance up front is effective, so that the data are accurate and the definitions that are used are consistent, there's a certain amount of the data democratization is the phrase that's usually used. There's a certain amount of have at it that I'm comfortable with. I recognize you need to be comfortable letting go of control, because then people will have other ideas and they'll go fishing for a time horizon that backs up their version of events, or a slice that backs up the story they want to tell. And that can be problematic. But the higher value from your PA team is really focused on building business value. I am much more interested in figuring out what is the configuration of a work process or a team that leads to higher revenue than I am in figuring out how to get you the visualization for spans and layers that is most exciting to you. Does that make sense at all?
It makes perfect sense. I do want to take a quick detour though, and I want to come back to people analytics in a second.
Okay.
But earlier you used the phrase you didn't want to rat somebody out. And it made me think about, well, that sounds like something like people in the mob would say, right? Have have you ever done anything with the mob?
Okay, so in fairness, my first job in high school, I did launder money for the Chicago mob for a couple of years. When I figured this out, I did quit. I didn't like do any of the crime. I just handled the cash in an all cash business and then figured out this is weird. This is an all cash business. It's weird. The only family members get to touch any money. And about 15 years later, they did go to jail for tax evasion. So there you go. Yes, I started my career. I'm probably going to be in trouble now. I started my career employed in a money laundering operation. And pro tip, if there's an all cash business, sometimes that's just smart because, hey, Square is expensive. Other times, you want to make sure you don't get in too deep so you don't end up with, cement shoes.
But if you do, make sure you don't rat them out.
There you
So
go.
that's the key. Well, I think a surprising thing that I've seen in the last few years, and I know that you have something to say about this, is the resurgence of the importance of things like job analysis because of what's happening with AI. So your eyes lit up. I said it. I'm not even going to say anything else. What are your thoughts in that space?
I actually literally this morning had a conversation with somebody who was talking about how they were going to go and rework all of their job analyses to show how this job was going to be new because of AI. And I sort of stopped and said, yes, but that's the last thing that you should do. Before that, you need to go one click down and look at all the tasks that comprise that job. And those tasks will have a different amount of vulnerability or opportunity, depending on your point of view, to being automated. And ideally beforehand, but at some point, really look at your business processes and figure out how can you rework this process so it is either more efficient, fewer steps, faster, more efficient as a process, not just an individual task, but an overall process. What are things you could skip? What are things you can automate? What are things that a machine could do that you wouldn't have been able to do? Or more effective. So what can it do better? Not just faster, not just compressing steps, but that would not have been possible at all. And then you sort of look at the new business process and what it requires. You look at the tasks that you would deploy within that new business process, and you look kind of the combination of tasks and capabilities. Who's got that capability, whether that is, I am a nerd, so I talk about it as silicon or carbon, but whether that's a piece of machinery, a bot, or it's a person, what's the correct way to do that with automation or a machine, with a person, or with a partnership of those two? And then you build the job descriptions. Then you do the job analysis. When you now have a better idea of what that business process needs to look like, how those tasks need to be architected. The job analysis comes at the end of the process, not at the beginning.
I think that is just it's making me laugh because I've been having these conversations at work, and so I just will like package what you said and just send it to a bunch of people right now. So that's why it's making me giggle. So I'm gonna I'm just gonna let that be for a second.
Awesome.
I think, well, actually, let's do some controversial stuff. How about that?
Oh, great. Let's get juicy.
Yes, let's get juicy. I used to tell people, in my opinion, back in the day, that I thought Meta was the top people analytics team
Thank you.
in the world. When they would ask me that question, I would never say it publicly because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But who do you think is the top people analytics team now? And who do you think were some of the best people analytics teams in the past? And maybe where did those top teams come from?
So if you want to get spicy, I'll give you some hot takes and some curious takes. Obviously, Google holds a really important place in the history of this and popularizing it. All the things that Laszlo did were just tremendous in terms of putting this out in front of people for what was possible. Meta, I still think we did some amazing things. We continue to do some amazing things. And the tie between the people analytics team and the workforce strategy team really doing SWP, I think they do it better than just about anybody but the military, and in some ways maybe better than the military. It's pretty baller. Interestingly, Walmart does some incredible things because they got 1 million employees. The potential is fantastic.
They do awesome.
They do
And by the way,
awesome.
anytime I've ever done something with somebody from Walmart, the views crush.
Yes.
Like everybody
Fantastic.
secretly wants to know what's going on at Walmart. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Amazon is an interesting case because there's incredibly interesting stuff over there, but it is pretty balkanized. So their fantastic stuff isn't in one big team like I had at Meta. It's kind of spread out, and there are these really fascinating pockets here and really innovative pockets over there in a way that I think is probably appropriate for their architecture and their sort of product quality, consumer quality internal things. But it does make it harder to look at it as a single team. Microsoft has a tremendous legacy. Dawn Klinghoffer absorbed my old team when I left. She's still really well regarded in the field. And if you notice, Microsoft, the engineering org does an enormous amount of tremendous people analytics as well. So there's a huge amount of people analytics coming out of Microsoft that is complementary to the thing that Dawn's team is doing, coming out of the engineering side. And I think that's really fascinating. I see more people analytics coming out of the business and coming out of engineering from Microsoft than I tend to see in other places. And then you asked about history. When I was running PA at Microsoft at the time, when you took that job, you got like a file cabinet, like a physical file cabinet, because it was in 2005. And I went back and like cleaned out the file cabinet, as one does, and found paper copies of stuff from that PA team going back to 1993. So these teams may have been named in 2010, but the Microsoft one had been around for at least 17 years before that. There is a long history here. And the industry, aside from the tech industry, which everybody thinks about, but the industry that I see with some of the very best legacy around this is the insurance industry. Insurance and pharma, both, because they have such a deep statistical rigor and actuarial rigor in the fiber of what their business is, have this really terrific legacy of deep efficiency, of really high quality practice around things that we would today call IO psychology. So there's some neat stuff going on in a variety of industries. Obviously, you've got Walmart with mega retail. You could call Amazon more a web service than anything else, I think, potentially at this point. Your Microsoft, Google, Meta are obvious ones that are in the news and in the popular imagination. But some of your companies, like some of the insurance and pharma, have been out there doing some really tremendous stuff for decades as well.
All right. Now all the people that for years have been asking me to talk about the topic can get off my back now. So thank you.
There you go.
That's like probably top 3 question I get asked. Why don't you guys ever say who the top teams are? I'm like, okay, well, we'll get to it. How about it? I mean, you're like a natural at this, Alexis. Like, have you ever done podcasts before? Like, what's your background there?
Well, you are very lovely. There are probably 2 pieces of background. One is that in between high school and college, I did a brief little, everybody needs to have some kind of misspent youth. And my misspent youth was in professional theater. So I did get good at that kind of thing. But in 2018, I ended up hosting Intel's official AI podcast. So Intel on AI, if you go deep enough into the archives, you can find my old eps from 2018 and 2019. And it was so much fun to be at the beginning of this format. And then like once a week, I got to talk to the CEO of some company doing AI in really interesting ways, whether it was back-end consumer or gosh, one of them was about bringing employment opportunity to underserved areas, including large swaths of like Africa, et cetera. I'd done some like decent work stuff with the UN. Intel wouldn't let me put my name on it, but I did do it. And so like it tied into that. I got to talk to the guy who did like all the AI for the Megalodon movie, which you don't normally think about. It was such a rush. It was honestly the worst part about leaving Intel was leaving that podcast gig. And I'll tell you, it was kind of fun when I got invited to do it. I had been, as you know, like a super AI fan for a long time. And we did a bunch of strategy stuff for the company, including a bunch of AI strategy. And I was like sending out articles to people all the time. And it got to be annoying for me to send out articles. So I built a little like distribution list. And then people started adding themselves to the distribution list. And before too terribly long, there were like 2,000 people on this distribution list, which was kind of strange. And one day I get this phone call and I pick up, it's like, hey, can we meet? Whatever. I pick up the phone and the guy doesn't even say hello. He goes, who are you? And it's like, what is this HR person doing? Like all this AI business. And you're natural and you're funny, blah, blah, blah. So would you this is weird. We've been shopping for a host for this podcast, but like, would you do it? So that is the backstory of how a random HR girl ended up hosting AI, Intel's official AI podcast.
Well, it makes a lot more sense now that you're a pro. I mean, you're not even calling them episodes; you're calling them eps.
Oh,
And I'm like,
sorry.
I don't even call them eps. I need to up my game. So, well done there, Alexis. I think there's a few things that I know you wanted to talk about today as well before we get into Cole's Corner. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up?
Oh, gosh, you've already kind of touched on it. The main thing that I am excited about at the moment is figuring out how we can, as a community of people interested in work and workers, help organizations really effectively navigate this transition to AI. It's been
Mm-hmm.
really interesting and both encouraging and discouraging to see how the last couple of years have gone. And now we're seeing these reports where folks are saying, oh, your AI pilots are failing, or we're not getting the reward or the benefit that we expect. And as a person who did business process stuff for a long time and a person who cares about like job structure and strategy and things like that, I'm sitting here saying, well, right, because summarizing meeting notes is not what your company does. So helping people summarize their meetings is not actually going to translate to revenue for you, probably. And there is there's sort of a naive assumption that if each individual person gets better at their job, the whole company will get better. There's this idea that there's a linear relationship between personal efficiency and organizational efficiency. And anyone who's studied teams or work groups or organization
Mm-hmm.
design knows that that relationship isn't as linear as you might initially think, right? You can have brilliant people who can't manage to get their stuff together. You can have a bunch of, one of my friends called them killer bees, a bunch of, sort
Yeah.
of B students bebopping around and wiping the floor with all of the A students, right? Because they are organized better, because their business process is better, because they've designed better product market fit, et cetera.
Yep.
And so it's fascinating to me to watch, and a little sad, to watch organizations just sort of throwing spaghetti at a wall and saying, we're just going to deploy it and everybody will use it. And somehow that will make us an AI company. Instead of doing that work I talked about, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, where you figure out what is it you're here to do? How can you do that thing more efficiently, help your cost profile, more
Mm-hmm.
effectively, help your revenue profile in a way that is a differentiator for your business? And that is a fundamentally different approach than just saying, well, everybody should be using, ChatGPT or Perplexity or Copilot or whatever your chatbot of choice might be. It's a really fundamentally different way to go about it. And it's hard for individuals to do because you have to have political alliances and you have to be able to see to the right and left of what you're doing. And it's usually not something you can do all alone. It's usually bigger than you. So I'm excited to see companies start to think about that. And I'm optimistic that I'll get to play with some of them and help them navigate through that.
Absolutely. What I am excited about too, you and I have got this training academy. If I ever get off my butt and actually launch it, it's going to happen. But I'm really excited about that with you and Gina Tabus. We talked about it a while back, and Sonali Kumar. So really excited about what's going on there. But do you want to join me in Cole's Corner? You ready for some of
Let's
these
do it.
questions? Welcome to Cole's Corner. All right. So let's start with some random rapid fire. Um, I love these kind of split the baby questions. Nobody likes them. Nobody goes for them, but I'm going to try to get you to answer this one.
Okay.
What discipline is your favorite? IO psychology, people analytics, workforce planning, or org development, and why?
Oh, so I'm going to say IO psychology because I think it includes all the others.
That's such an unfair answer.
I
All
know,
right,
right?
I'm yeah. Let's say for the sake of argument, it wasn't inclusive of all the others. Which one would you choose?
If it wasn't inclusive of all the others, I think I would probably still go with IO psychology because of the marriage between science and practice, the grounding in evidence, and the breadth of content areas that it covers. And I love OD, grew up in OD, first jobs were in OD, not the mafia one, first real professional jobs. But OD doesn't
Not
have
money
this.
laundering.
Yeah, OD doesn't have quite the same grounding in science and in evidence. It has more of emergent nuance to it. And workforce planning, I think, is incredibly pragmatic, but somewhat more narrow. And then you named off a third one that I'm forgetting.
People analytics, but
Oh, people analytics.
not.
Well, people analytics to me is so ambiguous as a term. There are an awful lot of folks who think of it as just reporting. And then there are folks who define it in so many different ways that I sort of put a pin in that and set it off to the side. I want to talk about, like, what are we really doing in this?
Would you say that people analytics and OD are two sides to the same coin?
Have you been reading my work? So yes, a few years ago, I was talking with an academic actually, and this person was bemoaning something about OD and PA being so opposite from one another, and I basically said, "You're full of malarkey. They're exactly the same thing. The process that they use is exactly the same in terms of identifying the right question, pulling up some kind of evidence. My personal bent is more towards scientific evidence, although I deeply respect qualitative, and then figuring out what you're going to do about that and then doing it. And so that friend of mine, Alec Levinson, another friend of mine, Maura Stevenson, who I just adore and got to see last week, and I wrote a paper, a chapter in, let's see, it was the Handbook of Organization Development. I think I'd have to go look at it on my shelf now, but it was basically like twins separated at birth, or two sides of the same coin, had a title along those lines about how PA and OD are really just two different styles of approaching the same kind of questions about making organizations function better.
Yeah. I only cited it like 17 times in my book, so it's definitely two sides to the same coin. I'm a big fan. When I'm prepping for this podcast, I just think I'm so clever. I'm just like, I'm going to find all these ways to tee up the guests to talk about the stuff they're talking. It never works. And so I was like, this is going to so like and so I'm just like, all right, that didn't work. Let's move on to the next one.
All
All
right.
right. What's the place you've never been to the most that you'd like to go and why?
Place I've never been to the most, that I most want to go to.
You've never been to that you would want to most go to
That
and
I
why? I'm
most
sorry.
want to go to. I have Machu Picchu really high on my bucket list, and I have not had a
Mhm.
chance to go. I am fascinated by I'm fascinated by technology, and I'm fascinated by the technologies that were emergent in different cultures and different time and space. And so I really fascinated by sort of the entirety of just all kinds of stuff in Central and South American culture and technology that's pretty amazing that they were able to pull off without the benefit of cranes. But also, I tend to really love mountains and forests, and so some mountains and some amazing trees are going to work for me. And as a side note, I have a child who has what I believe to be world's only walk-on choir scholarship when he was in college, which is a whole different story. But his choir got to go on a tour and part of it was getting to visit Machu Picchu and singing in Cuzco. So I have an extra little reason to try and follow my kid and his cool adventures.
I think you know where your next vacation is. I think it's happening. All right. Why do you do what you do?
Oh gosh. So I started thinking I was going to be a therapist. When I was 12, we moved to Southeast Asia, and I got really interested in how different people and cultures solve fundamental human problems, like what you interpret a situation, the way you interpret a situation. I went to an international school, so I dealt with this all the time. I got fascinated by questions of culture and problem solving and meaning making, et cetera. And the discipline where I saw that happening and relevant was psychology. And that seemed like you could have a job in it, where history, I wasn't clear what job you would have. And then I realized I didn't want to spend time with people who were sad all the time. And on the more positive element of that, I also realized that I would like to have maybe a little bit more consistency in employment. And I figured that I could have more impact at scale if I could work in workplaces. And the reality is you spend more time at work than you do with anything else except sleeping. And work is enormously important to your well-being, to your financial stability, to your family's health. It's important to your ability to establish intergenerational wealth. It's important to society. It's important to just about everything that I cared about. And so it felt like a worthy place to spend my time. And it helped that it's intellectually interesting and engaging. It helps that I'm kind of a mathematical person. And so I like problem solving where I can point to it and say, this has a higher effect size than that does. So this one's a better idea. And it also helps that IO at least dabbles in some computer stuff. I got my first computer when I was 7 years old in 1978. I realized I just gave you the math. But like I remember like writing crappy code on my crappy TRS-80 color computer and thinking that it was magical. And kept that. I was fortunate to be in an international school. I got to take CS in high school. I've always felt like there are ways that you can analyze problems and make sense of them and harness the powers of technology that can change the world. So I've tried to do that.
One of the great joys of having gotten to know you over the last few years, I actually tell. So I met you originally in the first Leading Edge Consortium. You didn't remember it, and then I met
That's
you
right.
again few years later. You also didn't remember it. And the thing that made you remember me,
Uh-huh.
you don't probably don't know this, is you were running for SIOP president. I remember it very vividly because I was in the back of the cab in New York City, and I was checking LinkedIn, and you had posted about running, and we, for all intents and purposes, did not know one another. And
Uh-huh.
I was just like, all you idiots, why aren't you voting for Alexis? Like, you should all be out. Like, she's a practitioner. She's brilliant. She's amazing in all these ways. You should be voting for her. And then I guess I came on your radar in some way. And the most awesome thing about getting to know you through this period has been figuring out how much of a weirdo you are. So thank you for sharing so much about your idiosyncrasies that of like why you do what you do and how you're like a mathematician and a computer nerd and you cut your own grass and all that stuff. So I love that stuff. So thank you so much.
I'll tell you, working at Microsoft was transformative for me in that way. It was the first place that I felt like I could really let my freak flag fly. And I vividly remember it was a guy catty corner from my office who, like on my second or third day, said, "Welcome to the island of misfit toys." And that was
Yeah.
just like so wonderfully freeing. So I'm glad that that resonates with you. It doesn't land super great on everybody.
Well, let's go move into some of the stuff that I'm reading and
Huh.
embarrass you some more. So, how about let's do that?
All right.
So, the first article I'm reading is called The World of HR is Changing Rapidly. IO Psychology Can Help by Alexis Fink and Cole Napper. And this article is a white paper for the PsyOp white paper series. And it talks about how the workplace is undergoing dynamic changes, significantly driven by advancements in AI, emerging technologies, and evolving cultural landscapes. And we go through this article and we make a variety of prescriptions about things like how to use advanced analytical techniques, how AI is going to apply to things like selection and performance management, organizational effectiveness, talent management, and go through basically the whole slew of things that either talent functions do or IO functions do or people analytics functions do, and how AI is going to play a role. But I wanted to ask you, so what inspired you to write this, and what's kind of your takeaway from this white paper, Alexis?
Oh, what a good question. I, if you looked across my family, the number one most frequent job title is professor. So I think I'm like just genetically kind of want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I have gotten frustrated by the number of times I've had to try and explain what IO psychology is, why it matters, and why you should hire some, right? It's, in the one hand, a really wonderful opportunity when I talk to somebody, they've never heard of it, and I can sort of introduce them to the field. It's, on the other hand, really frustrating that our flagship journal launched in 1917. So in over 100 years, our brand hasn't like penetrated better. So some of it was just basically some branding there. There was a small part of me where IO psychology has this interesting thing that's happened in the last handful of years where it has gotten cooler, and there was some
Mm-hmm.
change in the educational market. And now there are lots and lots of people who've gone out and gotten a master's or even a doctorate in an IO psychology program that maybe wasn't a traditional program that covered all of those areas. So it was a little bit of, hey, if you're walking around saying you're an IO psychologist, you should know this stuff. Like, get smart about this
Yep.
stuff too. If you didn't happen to get it in school, this is who you're claiming to be. So ramp up. And then, kind of the last part is maybe secretly part of my stealth campaign. It's not really a stealth campaign, stealth aspiration that within a decade, the number one career path or feeder pool for CHROs should be coming through IO psychology and people analytics. And so laying out the case that says most of HR really comes through this funnel. So if you are interested in most of HR and making it strategic and making it effective, this is the talent pool you need to be looking at. These are the people you need to be nurturing. And if that's the goal you have, maybe you should be doing some of this stuff.
I love it. I love it, Alexis. I don't have any commentary, nothing to add. I'm secretly on your campaign as well. So I'll call it a campaign.
All right.
Nobody likes the campaign as far as I can tell, but I'm still working at it. So I want to embarrass you with another article.
Okay.
This is just, again, my brilliance of putting this podcast together. So I was like, you know what? Usually I bring people on because they write really cool articles and I talk to them about it. But I was like, you know what? I'll just make these articles we read and then that'll be funny. And it's not funny. But so this article is called How AI is Exposing the BS Economy by Tomas that you mentioned earlier, and then Alexis Fink. And so this one talks about defining the BS economy. What is the term BS jobs, coined by the anthropologist David Graeber to describe roles that, even in the eyes of those performing them, are fundamentally pointless. And the role that AI is trying to do is in exposing some of these BI jobs and sometimes whole BI, let's call them industries. But I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this one. What's going on and how is AI exposing the BS economy?
Oh, this one was a lot of fun. And it, like a lot of the things in my life, emerged from a fun conversation. I sort of randomly dropped this idea in, and Tomas is really the one who grabbed it and said, my God, we should really write that up. So he gets the credit for this, I think, more than I do. Did you read the book, Bullshit Jobs? You should go out and read it.
No, the funny thing is, and I don't know if this was before or after, but I was at the Red Thread conference earlier this year,
Yeah.
and somebody had brought it up there, and this was like a key theme of the talking points of the conference is like AI is exposing all these BS jobs,
Yeah.
and so I wasn't really that familiar with the term beforehand, but I definitely left there
Yeah.
knowing that, that this was a concept. So I appreciate you guys popularizing it.
So the shortest version of like what this is and why we should care about it um, is that there are an awful lot of jobs that are not adding material value. They are moving things around. They are making somebody else look good. They are updating status reports that nobody's going to read. They are going through a PowerPoint and making sure that the fonts are all the same size. They're just not delivering any kind of high level recognizable business value. And I know that when I have felt trapped in one of these, I've gone home feeling like I just feel like I should either return my paycheck because I didn't deliver any value, or you should be paying me like 3 times as much because of how frustrating this is. And I kind of waffle between those two. But it is interesting now that LLMs in particular can automate a lot of that stuff. LLMs, you use Canva, and all of a sudden, a lot of your tweaking of slides is a lot easier than it used to be, right? Sure, you're kind of constrained, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And in the article, Tomas points out that you can pretty well spit out an annual report. And boy, I remember taking months to write those things and arguing over every word and how much did that really matter? It mattered from an optics standpoint, but it didn't matter from a substance standpoint in many cases, right? And so now that we have tools that can kind of expose this, there is a whole category of professionals who are looking around and saying, "Oh crap, this is not great for me." I was talking to somebody earlier, actually, literally earlier today, about the fact that if you look at jobs data, and you're closer to jobs data than I am now, over a lifespan, most people have an average of what it is, like 3 totally different careers, right? So it is not unexpected that people would be displaced from a current career and transitioned into a new career. We'll see, I think, some of that accelerate as some of these whole categories of jobs go away. One of the challenges is we've been automating away jobs that are sort of blue collar and pink collar for a really long time. And this is kind of the first time it's come after the, you know, junior attorneys. And this is the first time it's come after a lot of the folks who have thought of themselves as kind of the top of the social hierarchy, and been going around in their button down shirts feeling pretty fancy. So it is going to be existential and really like mess with people's heads, I think, for a while. And I want people to be thoughtful of that, because it doesn't have to be a crisis. We know from the World Economic Forum data, we know from every other technological innovation we've ever had, yes, a number of jobs get automated out of existence. When's the last time you saw somebody carefully illuminating a Bible, for example? But new ones come up in their stead. And typically more new ones come up in their stead than were lost. When you get a new piece of technological innovation, we need to figure out what those are. And I very much want the people who've been maybe doing things that didn't add a lot of value to be proactive about saying, well, what could I do that would add value? How can I be maybe the person that's helping figure out the new business process? Because, hey, I got some time that's been freed up, and I happen to know how this place works because I've been in it for a while. The other thing about that, in terms of really hoping to light a fire under some people and give them a sense of agency over controlling that destiny, is we know that mattering and meaning at work are important for overall well-being. And we know that bullshit jobs are not great at giving you a sense of mattering or meaning. They're not good at giving you a sense of progress. It's like Teresa Amabile at Harvard years ago showed the sense of progress being really, really important at work, right? And so my hope, possibly naive, is that in kind of shining a light on some of this and helping folks to feel less like victims and more like agency and being able to design what a more meaningful job would look like, we'll also be able to kind of help enhance some of those feelings of meaning and purpose and well-being, by helping shunt people into jobs or open up doors to jobs that have a little bit more of all that good stuff, instead of feeling a little superficial.
That is so positive and delightful. Me, I'm more of a negative guy myself. So tell me, what parts, or is HR a bullshit job, or are there parts of HR that are bullshit jobs?
I think there are parts of any discipline, they're going to have at least aspects of the bullshit job stuff to it, right? I hope that for the most part, HR resources are thin enough that we don't have a ton of this padding, that we are largely aligned to more value creation, but that's not going to be true everywhere. And, you know, the jobs I have had that felt like I was not contributing anything valuable also did happen to be in HR. So I don't think HR is immune from it. I think that HR is somewhat underfunded compared to some other stacks in the company, and therefore just has less slack to have space for this kind of thing. But technology is also rendering the work that some of these folks have done in the past less less feasible, and less justifiable, which then in turn kind of puts it in the same category.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to hit you with the last one that I'm reading. You'll be spared. This one is not written by you. But this is called Quality of Science, Not Writing is Important. Probably some commas missing there.
Yeah.
But this is written by Paul Spector. We've been covering a lot of his stuff lately. And he's saying science is not the humanities. And he comes up with this clever phrase that they call it the sci-humanities,
Yeah.
where we seem to have the writing style as the humanities, but we're trying to do real science. And so the quality of science, not writing, is important. The purpose of scientific communication is to clearly and precisely explain the methods and results of our investigations. And he goes on to kind of explain that why that is. But he gives some tips for clear scientific writing,
Yeah.
which I really, really, having read all of these nerdery articles and all of the different things that we read in graduate school, we really need to minimize jargon, define the concepts that we're using. I love this one. Avoid ideological language, because that's definitely creeped in the last few years. Clearly explain theoretical ideas, focus on methods and results, and avoid questionable research practices like we've talked about here from kind of like the open science project. So like harking, p hacking, some of the things we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But what did you think about this one, Alexis? And is what Paul's saying true? And I think you've taught some research methods yourself, if I'm not mistaken.
You are right. I did teach research methods when I was in graduate school. I taught undergraduate research methods, and at the time, I thought I'd be like teaching, "Hey, here's how you're gonna, build a sample that's smart and stuff like that." It turns out that I was basically just teaching scientific writing, and I deeply love this. I have bookmarked this. I think I'm gonna make people read it when I run across them. I I will often liken scientific writing to writing a recipe. Like, I don't want a lot of creativity. I want an ingredients list that I can follow that goes in a specified order, and every tablespoon should be like every other tablespoon, and I should be able to replicate it. That's the point of scientific writing. And one of my kind of standard talks I've done forever, I use the analogy of a drunk and a lamppost. And the idea that
Mm-hmm.
some people use data like a drunk uses a lamppost, they use it for support instead of for illumination. And I think really leaning into this idea of scientific not writing, which is I think what he meant for the comments to be, is about using the lamppost for illumination. You're not using it to prop up an a priori or a before the fact proposition. You're not using it for evidence to make your case. That's a totally different skill. Science is about being really, really clear. It is about being really, really replicable. And it is about being really fair and honest. And I think that a lot of folks get tied up in wanting to make their case, wanting to get published, which admittedly, to be,
Yeah.
you got to do that, right? Or just some ego stuff gets tangled in there sometimes.
No, never in the
You know,
scientific community.
shocking,
We are above reproach, Alexis.
shocking. But really, really, really being clear, and especially in an organizational context where people's real lives will be impacted, I think it is absolutely essential to take these principles and apply them not only into your writing, but into your overall design, right? Figure out what your metrics are going to be before you start something. What is the criteria that will help you say, yes, we will launch this, or no, we will not launch this? And I feel like folks skip those steps a lot. It's part of why I said IO psychology instead of people analytics as my favorite thing. Because I feel like IO psychology does a better job of that than people analytics does all the time.
Well, this is not from the article, but just as a consumer of a lot of these articles, here's what I wish people did more.
Yeah.
I wish they said why they're doing what they're doing
Yep.
clearly and concisely, said what they're actually going to do methodologically
Yep.
clearly and concisely, said what they found clearly and concisely, and said what the implications of that were clearly and concisely.
Yep.
It's not a hard ask, but a lot of people don't check any of those boxes sometimes, and or maybe one, maybe two. And if you make it to me, you've probably checked at least three, and you find the way I look at it now is if articles make it to me, because I'm not looking for them generally speaking, that means that they're the best of the best. They're
Yeah.
what's out there. And a lot of times they're indecipherable. And that means the stuff that doesn't make it to me is just pure hot garbage. And so I really wish that we as a field focus more on clearly writing and just communicating our ideas, because I think it's holding back. You made the point earlier. We've been around 100 years. We haven't necessarily had the level of influence and impact societally that I think we all think we could have. And I think clear writing is one of the things holding us back. And so I appreciate Paul pointing that out. I see you reacting to this, so I'm just going to stop talking now.
Yeah. I want to ask you something though. You're like a big shot author, super smart
Whatever.
dude.
Nah, not
Um,
accepting those compliments.
do you remember being in your like early in your career with your
Yeah.
graduate degree, probably early 20s, and
Yep.
you very much, I'll speak for myself. I very much felt like I had to prove to people that I was smart and I knew stuff. And
I know.
I thought dragging out the $20 words and the sentences with semicolons and all that
Mhm.
business was part of being credible, right? It was part of glorying in how smart I had become, which just felt
Yep.
like it was like a new toy. And so I have a hard time getting mad at people who are excited about their new toy.
Oh, sure. I'm not mad at them. I'm
But
actually trying to save them from pain. I'll give you a
exactly.
story if you'll listen.
Please.
Um, One of the things, like I remember, this was probably 5 years into my career. I should have known better by then, but I didn't. And I was giving a presentation to a few executives, and I said, "Yeah, no, this is the most parsimonious finding." And one of the VPs goes, "What?" I said, "The most parsimonious finding." And they go, "What does that mean?" And I said, "It means it's like the simplest finding." They said,
Say the
"Say that and never say the word parsimony again in my presence." And like, I was like, "Whoa,
so
okay,
I have a similar story, except embarrassingly, it happened much later in my career. I was literally in my 40s when this happened. And it was my boss, head of HR, and I was explaining in wonderful detail, I think like the embeddings for our skill model. It was something technical, right? Which I totally get off on. And he just like holds up his hand and he says, the guy was a lawyer by training, holds up his hand and says, "Stop. I feel like I'm in an Italian restaurant and you're trying to explain to me how you make the mozzarella, and all I want is some lasagna. Just
yeah,
give me the lasagna." And it has
yep,
stuck with me for a really long time. I think these technical details are amazing. When I am tired and not self regulating very well, I will go into the technical details because they are my favorite part. But the reality is, the client doesn't want them, doesn't need them. They need you to know them. But in general, one of my sort of standard lines is the response to anything where the subtext is, "Look how much better I am at your job than you are," like
yeah,
approaches zero. And a lot of
yep,
times that, the $20 words and the complex sentence structure and all the jargon, it basically just really puts people off. It makes people feel dumb and they don't want to listen. So while you're over here thinking you're enhancing your credibility, what you really are is reducing your impact.
exactly." And that's why I was saying what I was saying about the 4 points about say why you're doing it, say what you did, say what you found, and say its impact. That's so that we can, as a field, put our actual research in front of executives and they can do something with it.
Yeah.
Right now, they can't.
Yeah.
They
My poor team had to listen to me all the time, hammer them on what, so what, now what.
Yep, love it. All right, I've got one big question for you.
Oh boy.
You have moved into a new phase of leadership in your career.
Yeah.
What is the way you can have the most impact on all the fields that you support as you move forward? And what is your dream job at this point?
Oh, so I'm trying to do it, right? I'm trying to do the thing that I hope will have impact. I'm trying to write more, speak more, be more kind of publicly available, and also support those behind me. For the psychologists in the crowd, if you remember your Erickson's developmental stages, I'm definitely in the
Mhm.
generativity season at this point. So really trying to like lift up the field through any channel that is available to me at the biggest scale that I feel has integrity. Um, I think my ideal job would be to do this and have somebody pay me for it. That's pretty well the thing. There are,
We're working on it. We're
yeah,
working on it.
working on it. There are a couple of sort of large scale organizations that are doing transformative things that are, might be able to flirt with me enough to get me to come back. But right now, um, I'm really enjoying the control over my time and being kind of untethered about the messages, which has been really, really fun. Plus, let's see, I've had more time to water ski. In about an hour, I'm going to go have my third bass lesson. I can now play 4 bars of 2 different songs. Very exciting. So,
Woo.
trying to be a more well-rounded person.
If you weren't well rounded enough, goodness, I think you covered more territory than any of our guests, and you're like, I'm just not well rounded enough. I'm like, you're almost a perfect circle at this point. You're so rounded.
Well, you are very kind.
Well, I think you had some topics that are questions you wanted to ask me, so I wanted to give the floor to you.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I did have questions I wanted to ask you. The first is, you have a new book, and I wanted to talk to you about the process of doing that. Would you do it again, and what you learned as you went through this process?
Everybody always asks about the book. It's always the book. Okay. So would I do it again? Knowing that I like pain sometimes, I probably would. Like, I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier today. Like, I gave them like 5 or 6 instances in my life of where I probably should have quit something and I just didn't, and I
Yeah,
just kept going. And I feel like the book was one of those where it just, it's very difficult, and it just keeps on going, and then eventually it kind of like it's not as painful, and it's like negative reinforcement,
yeah,
but it's definitely. I will say people talk to me and treat me differently, which
yeah,
is interesting,
yeah.
and I was not expecting that really so much.
Really?
So yeah, I don't
In,
know.
in what
I
way?
like well, you know how like sometimes you think things in your head and you're like everybody thinks this way, and then they don't really think this way.
Yes, I do.
Um, and so like one of the things in my head that I've had kind of stuck in there for a while is like nobody with AI, nobody cares about books anymore, right? And so
Hmm.
I just assumed I would write it and then nobody would care and they would just go back to ChatGPT and ask it everything they wanted to know. And the reality is, I think I was way wrong about that. So that's been kind of a delightful surprise as a part of it. But would I do it again? Probably, but just because I like pain. The process was long, a lot of early mornings, a lot of weekends, a lot of sacrifices from family. I actually want to give Amit some credit. He gave me the one piece of advice that was actually like really tracked, and he
Yeah,
said, Cole, writing this book is going to be a sacrifice, and you're going to have to trade for things that you wanted to do with writing the book.
yeah,
And that was absolutely correct. But I also think it was worth it too. So I appreciate Amit for that advice. And I appreciate you for asking the question.
of course. Technical question. How are you thinking about skills and capabilities as AI evolves, as we build more human machine systems, and how those skills and tasks can really reconfigure how job works? I shared how I'm thinking about it. I'm curious how you're thinking about it.
Oh my gosh, you're trying to get me in trouble at work, aren't you?
Or you don't, or you can be
So
like,
I'm going to make a point. I'm going to go really narrow with this. I'm going to make a point I haven't heard anybody talk about.
okay,
And to me, I think it's, I'm not, if you getting to know me a little bit, I'm pretty hyper literal when it comes to certain things. And one of the things I always think about is like, how is this actually going to play out? Like, what does it look like tactically for AI to come in or an agent to come in and to do something? And so the way I've looked at it in my mind is like, in its most simplest form, a person who works for a company, you have a single node on like think of like an O&A chart, right?
yeah,
Single node, and they have, let's say conservatively speaking 10 tasks that they do, and
sure.
maybe like 10 skills that they're deploying to do those 10 tasks, right? That's a very very conservative estimate. So you think about that single node connected to those 10 skills that then connect to those 10 tasks, and that, if we're doing the math correctly, is 20 lines, right?
Hmm.
Now imagine you've got 10 AI agents that are going to come in and supplement and help with the parts of those tasks, or maybe even whole tasks,
Hmm.
but also kind of augment some of the skills that that person engages in. So
Yep.
you've added 10 nodes to the equation. You're probably adding something like 40, 60, 80, 100 more lines on there, depending on the number of connective points. And then that's just one human. So now you're going to add that to the team level, the departmental level, the functional, like all the different functions and the interconnections amongst the functions.
Yep.
And the thing I've been telling people like lately is if they think that a single software is going to come in
Yeah.
and is going to be able to help you understand all of those different connective tissues at every point in this process, you are in for a rude awakening,
Yeah.
right? And so, really, what we have to do, and again, as IO psychologists, we always see the individual is the fundamental unit of analysis and maybe the team level, is we've got to start with that job analysis at that level, understand the work and how you're bringing in
Mhm.
the AI, what role the AI is going to play, what role the skills are going to play, what role the task and the capabilities are going to play. And you're going to have to understand very fundamentally those interconnective tissues that I just mentioned.
Yep.
And until you can start to scale up from there, it's going to be a lot. You made a very wise point, and I think it was a little understated earlier, which is the things that you, like sometimes you think that an organization is just a collection of like highly performing individuals and that'll make a highly performing organization, and that is not true.
Right.
And what you could see is, because if I mean, I know you know this, but like maybe our listeners don't, from like a lean Six Sigma background, you know what one of the worst forms of waste is? It's called overproduction.
Right.
Right? And so
Yes.
what you're going to get to is you're going to have AI coming in and maybe replacing BS jobs, to quote you from earlier. But what you're going to replace them with is a bunch of overproduced work that never gets used
Yep.
because we don't understand the work from a work intelligence standpoint well enough to make a difference. So that is my perspective on it.
I love it. And God bless the commercial for work intelligence and the fact that we're not just doing these one for ones. That explosion of complexity is just unbelievable, particularly when you need like 2 or 3 agents to do the same task so that you can basically get like inter-rater reliability between them. And then you need governance around it and, statistical process control to take a factory technique in. So 100% with you. I think this is the last one. We'll make this the last one. You have kind of a persona that is very approachable and humorous and light,
It's debatable.
eh,
Yeah.
and light and really humble and kind and many fine things about you. What are the things people wish they knew about you? And I will share one of my observations is there is a lot more substance to you and a lot more technical sophistication than a casual listener would realize. So, what are the things you wish people knew about you?
Um, Well, I've actually been having this has actually been a huge cause of stress in my life over the past few years, because I feel like there's like the public persona and then there's the private persona, and I really legitimately don't know how to bridge those gaps, and that's been stressing me out.
Okay.
But I would say that the thing that I figured out, because like when we started the podcast, I thought it would come through, and then I realized that once you bring on guests, you just talk about the guests the whole time, and that's fine. Like, I think it actually makes for a pretty decent podcast, and that's why people listen. The creative outlet that I've tried to use, and it um, hasn't really scratched the itch, but is it does allow me to be quite generative. Is I think I produce articles at a clip that almost no one else does.
Yes.
And my way of trying to get my real thoughts out into the world, because for whatever reason I haven't figured out a way to communicate them on this stinking podcast, is just through the articles.
Okay.
And it's just my way of kind of giving back to the world and saying, maybe there's a little bit more substance there than you might imagine.
Yeah.
And no one reads them.
Ooh.
I mean, they read them. It's
Okay.
just the funny thing is, like in terms of like the impact of like, actually like people taking me seriously. So many more people take me seriously actually now because of the book,
Yeah.
but because of the podcast than the articles. And I was just like, for whatever reason, articles are trading at like all-time lows, is as far
Interesting.
as I can tell, in terms of like a medium, and books and podcasts are trading at all-time highs. And so I haven't figured out the mix there yet.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's an interesting insight about where the respect, I guess, and traffic is
Um,
coming from. I do know that for myself, writing is how I figure out what I think. So
mhm.
even if no one is reading the writing, it's valuable to me because it's how I clarify for myself. But maybe this is a little bit of encouragement for folks to go out and read some of those articles because there is a lot of substance and good stuff there.
I will say you got me almost as I'm borderline embarrassed right now.
All right.
That's the closest I've gotten to be embarrassed on this thing in a while. So well done.
Thank you.
Um, since I've done plenty of embarrassing you today.
Great.
Um, well, I appreciate you asking the question, Alexis. This is I don't think you understand how much this is a treat for me. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Any parting words before we wrap up?
Just parting words. I think that this is a golden age for people who use disciplined and scientific approaches to understand work and working. We are facing a seismic shift in how work happens. And we can either be at the front of the pack, helping lead and figure this out and take us towards a future that is effective, efficient, and healthy, or we can get run over. So I'm hoping that more of the people who are listeners here, more of the people who are like you and me in the people analytics universe and this IO psychology universe are feeling their oats a little bit and willing to take some of the risks and get out in front in their organizations, help take charge, and help reconfigure and reimagine work for the future.
There's that Indiana, feeling those oats. So there we go. All right. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott, and today's guest, Alexis Fink. Thanks for joining us, Alexis.
Thank you.